What is a misplay?
Oh, great question. How do you define misplay, Mark?
I think of it as an unforced error in a game that you're playing.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
I think they're easier to spot in games like chess. Like people talk about blundering a piece, right? That would be a misplay.
I don't know if I have one off the top of my head because I play games so well, you see.
That was one thing we worried about when, we transferred over. We kept the name. Misplay definitely fits more in line with something like Hearthstone.
I'm Hunter Pence, and you're listening to the Misplay podcast. Oh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Misplay, where we
make so many misplays that we don't remember them.
My name is Mark.
My name is Jason, and today we're joined by Dan Thurot, also known as Space-Biff.
Hello, how are you?
We are excellent. How are you, Mark?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I'm ready to go.
Tell us about not remembering your misplays.
I just feel like I'm bad at games and I misplay so often. When I was younger, maybe I would remember them and mull over them, but now I only really worry about things that happen above the table.
I don't think I've heard that phrase like above the table before.
Well, there's on the table and then there's above the table, right? So on the table is the moving of the pieces, the moves you make. Above the table is getting mad at somebody or putting your foot in your mouth or saying something that you didn't intend to come out as rude. I worry about that a lot more than I do the game itself, probably because I do it a lot.
If we get a chance to pick your brain about our game at all, I'm really curious what you'll say about it in our theory crafting together, because one of Jason's complaints about our game is there's very little. Is it over the table? No, on the table is the game. Over the table is the social piece, right?
Right. You can conceptualize games that way as a sort of planar experience, that there's the thing going on down below and then there's the thing above, and they're both important to me.
So that's going to set us up for where we're going to go today, Mark, because we brought Dan on the show today to talk about what the world's going to look like when we're ready to put our game out there and have other people leave a review, give feedback. I'm terrified of that moment when it's up on Board Game Geek and people can just say whatever they want about the game. There's no interaction. You just sit there and play your game and you don't talk to the other person. Someone's going to say that. I'm going to be mad. But before we do that, before we get there, this week's episode is brought to you by Board Game Casual. Board Game Casual is a YouTube channel welcoming people into the board game hobby with video reviews, recommendations, unboxings, tips for accessorizing on a budget, and more. We're going to be talking today, Mark, about game reviews. On a recent episode, Board Game Casual was talking about all of the board game deals that they have gotten recently. And as somebody, Mark, who wants to play more games and wants to play games with my family, I am always on the lookout for board game deals. Check out that video and more. Give Board Game Casual a view at Board Game Casual on YouTube at Board Game Casual channel.
The Thing.
You pointed at me.
It has to be different every time.
The Thing. Today's thing is Dan Thurot. And I want to start by saying the absolute best thing I can say about Dan, and that is his willingness to talk to us today. I can say with confidence that, like most people in the board game community, even after a couple of years, Dan had not heard of us. And that's not Dan is out of touch. It's such a hard space to be noticed in. Board games themselves are such a small niche community, and our show is really targeted at other board game designers. And within that, every one of those people also have a podcast or they have their own company. And it's just really hard to stand out against established people. So my point is, it says a lot about Dan to get an email from us and be like, sure, let's talk. So Dan, thank you for being here.
I'm happy to.
I put in my show notes that maybe I would ask, why did you say yes? We appreciate you. Why did you say yeah? I'd be happy to talk to you.
I worry that there is a tendency with certain board game reviewers and critics that they get a little too big for their britches. And I don't mean that in the sense that they're highfalutin necessarily, more in the sense that I'm really interested in new designers and new experiences, which usually translates to I have to spend a lot of time on discovery, looking around for new games, going to prototype conventions, things that are very high energy. They require a lot of effort on my part. So when somebody reaches out and they say, hey, we're working on a game and we're new creators and we're documenting it, that's very exciting for me because that's low effort. You basically just came to me and said, hey, we're doing this thing that's interesting. You made my life a lot easier. I didn't have to go looking for it. So of course I'm going to talk about it.
Well, we really appreciate that. And I was spot on. That was, like I said, probably one of the great things I can say about you.
Well, that's very kind. I wasn't raised to take compliments, but replying to an email is a pretty easy bar, I think, to clear. So I kind of dig it.
I have a friend who scolds me when I don't take compliments well, and they say, you say thank you, and you be quiet, and you don't talk yourself down.
Yeah, that's a very good reminder. I've been told that, and no, I'm going to squirm for you. That's my reaction.
I think that strikes and reads and sounds very true to form for who you are in the content creation space. You are a board gamer, you're a writer, you're an entrepreneur in your podcast and your review website, Space-Biff. And what that kind of culminates in is a very values-driven review website where you're not beholden to those outside factors like money, advertisements, other factors that would, in some opinions, like bias your review of a game. So welcome to the show. Thank you for the content that you create. That's, I don't know, at least for me, is one of the most compelling things, Dan, about your platform is it does have this kind of inherent ethos in how you approach what you're doing.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I think a lot about the ethical practices of what I'm engaged with. My first love when I began the long road of college education was actually ethics. I was thinking I was going to go into medical school, and then it turned out that I was just completely ill-suited to that world. And so I started looking into things that were adjacent, and I loved bioethics. I took a bioethics course and eventually took multiple courses, just thinking about things like what are the best practices in a field where best practices are very debated. And eventually it turned out that nobody really likes bioethicists because they're obnoxious and they talk a lot about things like HIPAA. And so that was kind of my launching pad away from the hard sciences and into what we often call the soft sciences, but really just the humanities, the field of thinking about things that are human.
We would have been friends in college, I think.
What did you study?
In different points, music, special education, and now behavior analysis.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Complete with an ethics code that I'm deeply infatuated with.
In bioethics, the amount of thought that has to go into any sort of analytical framework or research is so intense. And one of the things that I love about it, that I feel like a lot of people in the board game sphere don't understand, is that ethics is not just a set of best practices. Ethics really is the study of least worst practices and doesn't have a lot to do with board games, so I don't get to talk about it very often.
I'm going to try to merge them right now with my first question for you, Dan. Please keep in mind that when I ask you this question, I am not trying to throw shade at anybody. Please don't name drop anybody. It's like when I'm talking to my students, I'm like, let's not use names when we give examples here. But I really like your policies. You've laid them out on your website. You've made your positions pretty clear that you accept review copies, that you do not accept any payments for reviews, that your reviews are unfiltered. What I'm wondering is if you have some idea of how much of what we see, whether that is something on YouTube, whether that is something on a written website, how much do you think we are seeing paid advertisements when we're looking at people who are reviewing board games?
That is a really good question. I think actually things are a little better now than they were 10 years ago. There is some struggle with disclosure around, I think, especially previews. I know I've gotten in trouble because I will do previews, and to me, a preview means that I'm effectively just reviewing a thing before it exists. Somebody will send me a prototype of a game that they want to crowdfund. That's the most common example. And to me, I do not take money for that. I just review the game as it exists in that moment at my table, but I will say this is a preview as a sort of disclaimer to people that over the course of crowdfunding and development and printing and manufacturing and shipping and everything else, things are subject to change. as I'm sure you're both getting a crash course in right now, where the difference between what a game looks like before it's a physical product and after can be a little bit different. And so I try to disclaim that just so that people understand that even though I might be saying this is a project I'm excited about, it might be worse when it actually shows up. Maybe the publisher will make a change that the designer didn't approve of. That I've seen that happen. Maybe some production error will occur. I've seen that happen. Or maybe it will be better. A few years ago, I got in a little bit of controversy because I wrote a kind of negative, I wouldn't really say negative, I would say nuanced preview of a game called Arcs by Cole Worley. And some of the things that I wrote about it caused people to be like, oh my goodness, Arcs sounds like it will be bad, or Dan is betraying Cole, all sorts of dramatic things. There were even some people apparently at Leader Games who felt a little raw about it. For them, a preview is on the marketing budget. I mean, all review copies are, right? That goes into a marketing budget. But to me, the function of the preview is to tell you where the game stands right now. But there are a lot of things labeled previews that are paid for, because those are a pretty explicit marketing budget. They're going to just show you how the game works in a nice video so that when the Kickstarter goes up, or however you choose to crowdfund it, that you can go and watch a video and kind of get a feel for it. And that'll help some people decide whether they want to give money to the people who are creating the game. But that's not what a preview is to me. So I've run into some trouble where people would be like, oh, so you do charge for previews. Well, no, I don't. I receive a prototype and I write about it, and I'm trying to make sure that people understand that things are subject to change. That's probably the biggest undisclosed advertising that goes on in our hobby, is those preview videos. I think people are getting a little tighter about disclosure in that, as far as I can tell. The other disclosure would be review copies. Some people don't do a great job of disclosing review copies. Some of that is, at least here in the United States, the FTC is kind of wishy-washy about it. In theory, you should be disclaiming anytime you release any sort of editorial statement about it, I believe. The problem with that is, what counts as an editorial statement? On social media, on Blue Sky, I'll put out a weekly thing where I say, here's a list of all the games I played this week, and you're free to ask me questions about them. But it's not like if somebody says, how was this game? And I say, oh yeah, it was pretty good. It's not like then at the bottom I say, I received a review copy, which would technically mean that I'm doing a non-disclosure right there. But I think most people would agree that micro-blogging, it would be pretty hard to put in a disclaimer there. But anytime I write an article, certainly, or make a longer statement or a quote on a thing, then I try to disclose. Which is all to say, I think people are trending in a good direction. There certainly are, you'll kind of hear the boogeyman that there are paid reviews. And there are, but they tend to not be the main outlets, as far as I know. If a channel's been around for a couple of years, they probably are disclosing, just because otherwise they usually get outed. But I don't know the particulars of everything. I mean, it's such a growing space compared to where it was 10 years ago, when it was a lot smaller. But 10 years ago, yeah, there were some places that were doing paid reviews and got in trouble for it. On the whole, I think it's pretty good, but there is some of that.
When you mentioned the role or kind of the rise of crowdfunding in the context of paid reviews versus non-paid reviews and disclosure, do you imagine, in your experience and what you've observed in the field, how has crowdfunding kind of shaped or had influence on that transparency or that role of disclosure and paid versus unpaid reviewing?
I think one of the immediate things that comes to mind is that the rise of crowdfunding really decentralized the way that marketing was functioning previously. Board games were still pretty much in their infancy, but you only had a few websites doing things. And as soon as it became apparent that there were going to be so many creators making so many games, it created the opening for a cottage industry of people who do previews or who do marketing or who do consulting. And it was pretty natural for them to slot into there. And for a few years, at least, there was sort of this Wild West attitude to it, where you did get a lot of people who were kind of grifty, but I haven't seen as much of that lately.
I want to take you back to a term you said a couple of times, review copy. And just to make sure that we have the right definition, everything's new to us. So review copy, is that the pre-production copy? So that's the copy that I get back from my manufacturer before we're ready to say, yeah, this is exactly what we want.
So to me, a review copy is any copy of the game that I am sent in order for me to produce what I do. Sometimes that is a production copy. Sometimes that is a finished copy. And sometimes it's kind of like a bashed together prototype, although I tend to be pretty clear that it's a prototype just because the images that I show in a review are going to look more prototypey. Although that's changed. Like nowadays, some of the prototypes I'm sent are gorgeous, almost undiscernible from a finished thing. Like I could probably sell them on some sort of black market, which would be highly unethical. And of course, I don't do that. But generally, that's what I mean when I say review copies. They could be production, they could be a finished copy, whatever the case may be. In many cases nowadays, it's just cheaper once the game is warehoused for the company to send me a game. That's pretty much shipping plus, $5 because they have printed so many. For a smaller creator, it will pose a larger investment on their side because, of course, they haven't printed at scale. And because I tend to try to emphasize smaller creators, independent creators, often people who are trying to do their first project, then the stakes are a little higher usually than if it's like a big company like Asmodee sending me a copy that honestly to them is a rounding error. And I try to approach those with all due, I don't know how I would put it. I respect perhaps, like I'm still going to try to talk about that game as clearly and honestly as possible, but I will be a little more careful to make sure I know how to play the game, things like that.
Okay, so, where we're at right now, we are at a point where we are getting our first quotes back from our manufacturers and we're getting our first price spec sheets. And I am thinking about the pre-production copies that I would like to have in hand when I'm in the first exposure playtest hall at Gen Con this year. And the first promotional videos that I might be able to get from somebody or reviews. And if I'm understanding correctly from what you're saying, you believe that most people will accept a copy. We'll get to whether or not they would choose to review it or not a little bit later. But you think that most, whether it's somebody on YouTube or a review site, will accept the review copy without the expectation of any additional payment.
I really don't know. I think that on the whole, most people do not expect payment. I do know that some channels do take payment. I mean, to me, ethically, if they are offering editorial, they really should not be taking payment from you. If they're making you like a service, like a how to play video, that would be a totally different ballgame. They are not actually reviewing the game. They are providing an integrated service. There are a range of products that they would be offering you, but that would be pretty explicitly transactional. Like I think about Rodney over at Watch It Played, and I think of him as somebody who's very ethical, very concerned with ethics. And when he receives a copy and is paid to make a video, there is nothing unethical about that because the product is not his opinion. The product is the how to play video. It's an informational thing that is integrated into your streamlined process. You want there to be a video. Many people don't like reading rule books because it's a drag. And so some people will prefer to watch a video. That can be a product that you are offering, but you don't want to make your own video because, it's a pain in the butt. You don't know how. Rodney is very professional about how to explain games. He's explained hundreds of games. And so you go and you pay him. But that's not a review. Now, him receiving a copy of the game might still be an essential part of that because he's going to be setting it up, he's going to be handling it, he's going to be showing people how to set it up and handle it. But a review copy, to me, would imply some sort of editorial stance. And in that case, it would be ethically inappropriate to me to add the extra entanglement of a financial incentive. Because if you're offering me money, now I want to make the review positive. To me, receiving financial compensation for a review for editorial would prove too compromising, which is one of the reasons I don't do that. Now, I do know that some companies are probably doing that because it isn't uncommon for me to receive emails from certain game publishers where they will ask me to attach a term sheet. And sometimes they're surprised when I say, no, I don't do term sheets. You don't pay me. Now, often those are not like that's not like Asmodee, right? That's not the big sharks in this pond. Usually those are people who are kind of new to it. Maybe they don't know that's unethical. But I do know from conversations with some people that there are outlets that will try to get paid for reviews. I don't always know who they are. They don't tend to last very long, or at least they're not like the big people. And it's not like Shut Up and Sit Down. It's not No Pun Included. No Pun Included doesn't even accept review copies. I mean, there are all sorts of different considerations there, but I don't know of any big outlets that are taking review copies and being paid to write reviews right now.
Well, I think you did a good job of explaining the difference for me between editorial and something like a how to play video. Because I'm thinking about all the how to play videos I've seen before. And you're right, that totally benefits the game. There is a clear benefit to whoever the game designer is to have somebody out there making, I've come around on that. Like in my head, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. Where before I might have thought, oh, they're just being paid to do that. But there is a good reason for doing that. I get that.
And that's where preview gets a little shaky, right? Like I could totally see somebody setting up the game and showing you how like the prototype works for a crowdfunding thing. And it might seem a little bit like a review. And where it gets shaky for me is that someone like Rodney at Watch It Played, he is not going to offer editorial, or at least he shouldn't be. He, as far as I have seen, he never has done that, where he hasn't ever been like, this is a good game. He's just like, hey, here's a game. I'm excited to show it to you. Here's how it works. And he's very professional, even if he's enthusiastic. You don't want to learn from some dead-eyed crocodile person. You want to learn from somebody who's smiling, who's personable, who's speaking quickly, who's enthusiastic. You don't want to, and that can come across, I think, sometimes as editorial. And so there is a line that people ought to be walking when they're doing that. And sometimes I think it's natural for people to slip over that line. Sometimes that's just accidental, right? Like if you're teaching a game and you're like, I love this game, is that editorializing? Well, yes, but it can also just be like you think you're being enthusiastic. That's why the preview space is a little fraught. And that's why I try to delineate pretty clearly in my own work, like what is a preview versus what a review, even though for me, a preview is still just a review of something that you can't like go out and buy or experience.
On your website, you describe your writing process for your reviews as you're writing for yourself. You're also writing the content in the way that you'd like to see it in the world. Tell us a little bit more about how you find the balance of honest review with the potential impact that it will have on the game that you're reviewing, or how much of a consideration that is for you.
Well, that's a great question, and it's something I've been discussing with a few people recently. I'm a little bit doubtful of how much impact I could possibly have on a game. But when I say that, I kind of mean one thing and not another thing. Some people will bring up like the shut up and sit down effect, where if you get a positive review from Shut Up and Sit Down, that can sell through a print run really easily. I have been shown stats from some people in the industry. Now, I don't like to know this sort of thing, so if you're listening, please don't ever do this to me. But I have been shown by some people who, like, they were doing a Kickstarter, and halfway through the Kickstarter, I dropped my review or preview of their game. And they've shown me the way that my review may have, like, resulted in a jump in the curve, right? They have like a little graph, a little line graph. You make most of your money on a Kickstarter in the first 2 and the last 2 days of the campaign. And so they show me like, okay, here's our initial crowdfunding thing, and now here's the trough, and then here's your review, and it's this big spike. So I know that I have had that sort of impact in the past. So absolutely, a positive review can sell copies. Where I'm a little bit wiggly on it is I don't think that, there's this discussion around, will a review like make a game sell for more? And I actually don't think I've ever seen an instance of that. For instance, like if I have a game, and this often will happen, like let's say that I have a game that I purchased, which I should note also presents a form of bias because it is so common to go onto Board Game Geek and read a review of some trash product, right? That was not made very intentionally. It was made with a bunch of miniatures. It maybe is some first timer's passion product, and it was super expensive, but it's very lavish, and people will be giving it a positive review because it's a royal nonsuch. They don't want to look like they made a bad decision. And you shell out $200 for something, you're going to say something positive about it, right? No one is out there on their jet ski being like, this is the worst jet ski ever. Everyone's showing off their hardware. And so to me, actually, often when I pay for a game, I feel that temptation to like speak more positively about it. But there's this discussion about like, will I write a positive review so that I can turn around and sell that game for more? I've never seen any example of like somebody being able to write such a positive review that they change the aftermarket price. There might be, if you were Shut Up and Sit Down, if you were NPI, you might be able to do that. I really doubt that I could do that. I just don't believe that that's a thing. On the whole, though, my approach is that I hate the commercial side of it. I hate thinking about it. I hate having to know how many people are subscribed to my site. None of that is why I do what I do. And so I try not to think about it. I don't usually discuss price in my reviews. That is a very considered decision. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I've written about that in the past. But in general, I want to disentangle the game's artistic and cultural and ludic elements away from its commercial considerations. I think that's in part a fool's errand. I don't think you can ever do that completely, but that is something that I want to do as much as I think it is possible.
What percentage of the games you receive do you end up reviewing or previewing?
So if we're talking about review copies that are sent to me, it's probably like 80 to 90%. I would have to go through. I keep a spreadsheet. The problem is that sometimes I will get a game and it's just not working, usually not because it's bad, but because it's kind of average. First of all, my policy is that I have to play a game either at least 3 times or until I understand it. That puts a pretty high barrier for certain games, like war games, for example. War games with really dense rule books, with kind of a simulationist mindset, games that might take multiple days to play. It's really hard for me to get in 3 plays of those games, but I do want to write about them because my background is in history. That's kind of where my main interests lie. But the hurdles necessary to pass to write about those is very difficult. So in those cases, it might take longer. But also if I'm just sent a game that's kind of bleh, I don't really have anything to say about it, it's not that interesting to me, I will often struggle with it. Right now, for instance, I was sent, I'm going to get in trouble. Not because, and I'm only offering this, I'm going to name the name, but it's because it's a good game beloved by so many people.
Okay.
And this is more about me, right? Galactic Cruise.
Yes.
Which so many people love, but to me is just an indication of how out of step I am with what Euro games have become over the last decade. I just do not have anything to say about Galactic Cruise, but I was sent this copy of this game. Of course, it's a very expensive game. It's a beautiful game. So I want to say something about it, but I cannot, after 2 plays, think of anything that I would say that would add to any conversation about this game. I'm having this internal debate. Do I power through? Do I play it a 3rd time so that I can write something that honestly very few people are going to read? Those who read it will probably come away unsatisfied. And that's the sort of thought process that I go through games that I am sent that maybe end up on a pile where I don't actually talk about them.
So can you use the rule of 3 to not to have to write the review, right? You play a game, you don't really enjoy it. Let's not put Galactic Cruise in this bucket, but you play a game, you don't really like it, and you don't want to write negatively about it. You just not play it again and not write about it?
I guess I could. My attitude is if somebody has sent me something, I mean, first of all, that is a form of payment, right? Legally, that's a form of payment. I do think it's a discrete form of payment away from financial compensation, but I do feel beholden to try to cover everything I am sent. Nowadays, if someone sends me a game, I'm pretty open usually that I can't get to everything. There's also just a time component. I have a real job. I have a family. I will try. Galactic Cruise, it's actually staring at me right now. It's over there on my you must play this one more time pile. But I guess I could. Yeah, I could game my own system.
What are people's reactions to, let's talk about a negative or a less favorable review? How do you take that? Because I'm not looking forward to that myself.
Well, I mean, the first thing I should maybe clarify on my end that I probably was inarticulate about is generally these aren't the negative reviews that I'm too worried about. They're just kind of like the average reviews. Something like Galactic Cruise, I can see a certain like systemic beauty in it. I just don't care about it very much. That's why I'm hesitant for that one. Isn't because it would be a negative review. Like I enjoy the craftsmanship of a good negative review. Not that I'm ever looking to write one. But the negative reviews, okay, so switching on to those. I don't know what you can expect from your end. On my end, the internet has some weird people on it. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have received death threats for having written a negative review.
Oh, that's not right. Whether you're weird or that's not right.
I've received like sexually explicit comments. I've received plenty of comments, discussing my appearance or my intelligence. That's pretty common. I think only twice, maybe. I think twice I've had I wouldn't classify them as stalkers because I don't think it has really gotten to that level, but people who would follow me around from place to place digitally and keep leaving disparaging comments, calling back to the thing that they had been offended by that I had written. So I don't know how a negative review would impact you two with your game. I assume it would suck. I have heard plenty of feedback from publishers who have been upset about negative reviews, including a couple years back. One publisher asked if we could discuss my review and then proceeded to shout at me on Zoom for an hour. So I assume it's going to hurt to get a negative review. But from my perspective, writing a negative review carries a cost that is not posed by a positive review.
I was in a meeting once on the receiving end of something similar like that. And I was very thankful for my boss who looked at me straight through the Zoom and said, "Mark, you can end this meeting." And I couldn't have clicked the end button faster.
I imagine that's very tough.
Well, let me ask you this question. We're going to be reaching this point where we're going to have the pre-production, the review copies of the game, and we want to send those out to people to have them, review it and give feedback as we build up towards our Kickstarter. What advice would you give game designers who are ready to take that step?
If you're trying to put your game out there, I think like all art, one of the best pieces of advice I ever received was just to not take criticism from anybody you wouldn't ask for advice from. People have different tastes, which first of all, we are a very taste-oriented industry. We're still sort of discovering that, like in film, we've all agreed pretty much that film is subjective, but that there are still things that lean toward more the objective, right? Like you can tell the difference between a good film and a bad film, even if you have differing tastes from it generally. We're still learning that in board games. This is a subjective thing where everyone has different tastes, but there are still hallmarks that will be like more people agree this is a good game or more people agree this is a bad game. So separating yourself from that and realizing people are going to hate this game and say dumb things about it that will be reflections of where they're at and not a reflection of you or this thing you've created. I used to be a lot more invested in people's feedback on what I would write or the fiction that I've published, the art that I create, until I kind of realized that like on the whole, people tend to like this stuff. If someone's really upset about something, it's almost always a reflection of they had a bad day or they have like a political axe to grind or they've developed some sort of like parasocial connection to me that they're going to focus in on. They've decided I am some way. And that all exists in their head. It doesn't exist where I am, and it doesn't need to. I don't need to argue with them. I don't need to correct them. Almost all onlookers are going to see them shouting or being weird or being negative or whatever the case may be, and they're going to understand instinctively that that person is acting in a sort of a solipsistic manner. And that was a huge step for me when somebody finally told that to me. It was very freeing. I don't need to react to everyone saying something about something I've created. Their view of me is not based on reality most of the time. Just very freeing.
Can I ask if you would recommend, you've mentioned Rodney a couple of times, and I've watched his videos, and I really like the production value of his videos. Are there people out there that you would recommend and say, oh, this might be a good person for you as a new game designer that, might be interested in telling your story or showing your story in your game?
If you want to focus on something like a Let's Play video or a how-to play video, Rodney, I think, does stellar work. I haven't watched too many because I like to read from a rule book. For me, learning from the rule book, I consider that actually part of my job, so to speak. If I go and I'm trying to learn your game and I can't learn it from the rule book, that is also a part of the game. Nowadays, rule books tend to be pretty well written, but back in the day when crowdfunding was very young, I remember writing about a game where the game's creator and some of its playtesters, who were a very devout community around this game, got very upset with the review I had written because I had gotten some rules wrong. But the reality was, in that case, Now, I've gotten rules wrong plenty of times, and I've been called on it, and I'm usually very grateful to be called on it because I want to review the game correctly. But in that instance, the rulebook had been written so poorly, including little examples that used the wrong rules, that the review using the wrong rules was sort of a more accurate review of the game than playing with the right rules, because most people, it turned out, were playing the wrong rules.
Well, that's 10% of all our misplays.
Our misplays are not our fault all the time. And that can be very useful, I think, for a critic to point out not only the play on the table, but some of the above table issues that the game presents. I'll sometimes roll my eyes when people are like, this game is very group dependent, because first of all, every game is group dependent. But when you say this game is group dependent, I want you to show me why it's group dependent. Say that such and such when you were playing the game had a problem with X or Y, or it caused a lot of fights. Don't just say it's group dependent. That's a nonsense phrase that doesn't mean anything. It's filler. Give me an illustration of that, and suddenly it's telling me something about a game. Like Cole Worley's games, for instance, are very combative. They are very confrontational. He uses king-making explicitly as an element in his games. So show me how. Tell me the ways that players might clash. Don't just say this game depends on the group.
In that same vein of kind of advice and guidance for newer designers, what are some of the common mistakes that you see independent designers making when they're approaching reviewers? And or what do you wish newer developers and designers understood better about the review exchange process?
That's a great question. It's a little bit of a broad question, so I'll probably divide it into two parts. The first part is I do play a lot of games, for instance, at prototype conventions. Usually I'm there because the people running the show have reached out and said, we would like you to come, because they are hoping that I will write about the games. That's their objective. So I get like a badge that unfortunately gives away my role as press or a reviewer or whatever. And people will show me their game, and they're very hopeful that I'm going to write favorably about it, and it will help them find a publisher or gin up more of a following. And all of those things have happened. I do not begrudge that they hope for that. But sometimes in that level of interaction, the amount of pushback I'll get from the game designer, they will want feedback on the game. They'll say, how did you like it? And I tend to be very honest in my assessments. I'm not trying to be mean. If it seems like the person really can't handle the feedback, I'll just be like, yeah, this part was interesting. This part was interesting. But if it seems like they can take it, I am going to tell them what I think about their game. At that level, it is surprising to me sometimes and this doesn't happen often, when somebody will get their ego bruised and try to explain their rationale behind every little mechanism. My first piece of advice is just don't do that. And this goes for reviewers, it goes for play testers, just take the statements and let it wash over you. Take it or don't take it. Call them a fool in your head, but do not start a confrontation. And the same goes for after somebody has published a review. Please don't start a fight with them on the internet. If they made some sort of factual error, you can point that out, but it will not make you look good to start a little fight with the reviewer. So that's the first part of that interaction that I would say. The second part is, I don't know how it works for other reviewers, so I can only talk about myself. Personally, just reach out to me. I have so many games that I have written about have come from people who said, we've liked your site for a long time, we like your writing, we like the same kind of games as you, but we were really intimidated to reach out to you and ask you to look at our game because of, this was our first time game or whatever reason. But for me, for my site, I'm looking for that first time game. I'm looking for things that people will overlook. I mean, that's sort of my site's ethos anyway, is that I want to be the one who's finding a new designer. I want to put something in front of my readers that they have never experienced. So a first time designer who thinks they have something cool, but they're intimidated to reach out, just do it. Just ask. It's okay. I might say no. I say no all the time, but often I will point you in the direction of someone else who might be able to take a look at it, or say, I can't take a look at it right now as a prototype, but when you actually finish the game, I would be happy to look at it. I try not to be intimidating. So that would be the second part, is it is okay to ask. The worst that can happen is they can say no or ghost you or whatever. That's fine too. It's not a reflection on you.
I don't want this to sound like tooting your horn too much, but you've mentioned a couple times the following that you've developed. We've really been trying to think of how to grow our audience under the constraints that we exist under. We're not on Instagram. We're not on X. We're not on Facebook. We're not on YouTube. But we know you have a large following and you do have like these measurable effects on games that you write about. But what did you do to grow your audience if you're operating under a lot of the same constraints that we do?
That's a good question, and I'm so ill-suited to answer it because I feel like I don't do anything. I'm just bad at it. I've never really tried explicitly to grow my audience. I'll put it this way. I am bewildered when WordPress sends me an alert that says that an article is getting a lot of hits. Because in my mind, they're still each getting read by like 2 people, and I'm pretty sure one of them is my mother. That's how it began. There was not any of what I wanted there to be. No one was writing what I wanted to read. And so I started doing it. And no one looked at it for a very long time. Now, sometimes people will seem to be reading it. I'm grateful, but I don't know. I don't think I've ever said subscribe to me. It all makes me very uncomfortable. That sort of SEO optimization audience. To me, the things that I'm trying to create are very much me. And if it's appealing, then it's appealing. And if it's not, I'm not going to change anything to make it more appealing. That's just how I am. Some people are better at that. So I can't give you any advice about that. But I will say that one of those services that people offer is there are people who will just handle, kind of like run the Kickstarter for you. Now, that's probably beyond your reach at this point if you're just trying to create a game on your own. But I do see, there are plenty of small publishers that are willing to invest money into trying to find a following. There are resources there now that did not exist when I started doing this.
Well, let me go back to what you were saying, because Mark has been making heart symbols across the table from me. I think that's the ideal path. I know you're describing, you're not sure how it happened. It happened essentially organically. And that is a word that we have used many, many times. I think for us, there hasn't been something that's happened to, where we get, I guess, noticed is probably just the best word. We just really haven't been noticed in what we're doing. We've been attempting to do it organically. And like what you had said, you just keep doing what you like. That means not posting on X and not posting on Instagram. And you just post on Blue Sky because that's what you feel is the right way to do it. Then you do it. We've been doing that. And so I feel like we're in line there. We think what we're doing is relatively interesting and could be helpful to other game designers. And so it's just trying to find out how to reach them.
I agree. And I should be clear, I'm not saying that people should do it my way. I'm just constitutionally unsuited to kind of like the search engine optimization grind and all of the stuff that people do. I mean, I've seen sites that they're like YouTube channels that have existed for like 2 years. And they're like, now we're celebrating 100,000 followers. And I'm going, wow, that sure didn't take me 2 years. You must be doing something right on the marketing side. So I don't know what to tell you. And I wish I did, because I would love to be able to tell people the things that would help them succeed.
No, I think you said it. I'll say it because you don't want to say it. That is the right way to do it. I agree with you. I appreciate that advice, reaffirming for us that is the right way to do it. And that's the way we're going to keep doing it.
And the thing is, if it feels right for you, then I'm glad it is. That's just the nature of reality and physics, is that if you speak to fewer people, your words will have entered fewer eardrums. And that's okay. You just have to sort of come to terms with it.
How's your peace, Jason?
Mark is smirking at me. I'm at peace. I feel good.
I don't believe that's true.
It is true. It goes back to what we determine as success, right? When we set out to do this, Dan, our goal was always to go and take a game to crowdfunding. That was the goal. The goal wasn't to sell 10,000 copies. The goal was to take it to crowdfunding and learn how to do that. And I feel like we're going to be able to achieve that. And whether we, sell 100 copies in our Kickstarter or we sell 500, I think 500 for me is like, wow, we really did it. And I think it's reasonable. But if we don't, we learned how to make a game. That was the goal. Hopefully we can still fund it.
And I applaud the wisdom of that, right? Like, I think it's very natural for us to set a goal. And then as we close in on that goal, we move the goalposts. My hobby is writing about board games. It isn't playing board games. Playing board games is a component of it. It's necessary. But to me, I receive my joy from writing about them and discussing them. And yes, the joy is amplified when other people come and discuss them with me. But really, I'm just delighted that I'm able to earn enough money to keep doing it without having to really invest too much into it.
I feel like we'd be really good friends in meeting in different circumstances, and maybe be really good friends going forward from here. I really appreciate the way that you talk about your process, your values. I really have enjoyed the articles that I've read on your website. It just makes me chuckle because I'm like, Jason's always like, everything has to be business on the show. You can't talk about anything different. I'm like, man, can we just talk about writing for a little bit? I'd love to hear like your thoughts on like a deeper dive into the ethics of AI, because I know part of you have a thing of your artwork has to be from humans for games that you're going to review. There's so many like tangential things that I would really enjoy talking about that I know are not the scope of our show.
Well, hey, let's hang out.
Yeah, let's hang out.
Come if you're near the Salt Lake area, let's get a game in.
Oh, there's good climbing in Salt Lake City too.
There's great climbing.
Well, I'm glad I was able to introduce the two of you.
That is a good feeling. And that's partially what I feel about games, right? Is I never feel more joy than when I'm able to introduce people to a game they hadn't heard of. There's this beautiful reaction sometimes where people will send me messages or leave comments where they're like, how do you even find these games? Because I do pride myself on trying to find things that people overlook. And then they go, I got this game, and it just opens up their mind or their creativity or whatever it is. That's the reward.
Well, Mark, with Dan on the show today, there is no other thing. I think it was really important that we made Dan the thing that we talked about today. I know you don't like talking about yourself, but where can people find you? What is your website? Where can they go?
Well, if you would like to read about board games, you can go to spacebiff.com. Just a little website called Space-Biff. If you don't remember the .com, it's very searchable because its name is Space-Biff. So there's no meeples or cardboard or anything like that in the name. It's just Space-Biff.
And that's where you'll also find his podcast, Spacecast.
Yep, that's true. You remembered better than I did. Well, thank you both for having me on. This was lovely getting to know both of you a little better. I'm eager to follow your journey. I hope that designers will look into it a little bit because I'm sure there's a lot of hurdles that you've already bypassed. I hear so much from designers who are panicking because of this or that hurdle that they see looming and don't know how to jump over it yet.
That's us. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show, for your insight and being an advocate for the little guys. We really do appreciate it, and it was a pleasure to have you on the show. The Misplay podcast is brought to you by Howley Boy Games. Consider donating at buymeacoffee.com/themisplay. We express our humble gratitude and recognize any level of support here on our list of sponsors. If you'd like to become a featured sponsor of the show, find our form at themisplay.com/sponsors.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely meeting both of you, Jason and Mark, and good luck. I'll follow your journey with great interest.
And you are not required to stay in Discord. Please, if you disconnect, that's totally fine. Everybody has 5 million. Don't worry about it. Thank you.
I will. I'm in too many Discords.
See, exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great
night.
one.